And welcome to the Eclectic Radical. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical, and with me is one of my favorite friends of the show, Renee Johnston.
Hey,
Renee,
Chris.
how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm here with you, so we're good.
I always enjoy the chance to be on the stream together. I know I was saying that off the air, but I want to say that on the air too. And this is an important topic. This rally has been sold really hard from a lot of people, from Jimmy Dore fans on social media to Chris Hedges writing on Substack. And I just can't help wonder why. I mean, because I've seen your research, and as I understand it, Chris Hedges isn't a stupid person or a naive person. So what's this constant pressure for everybody to attend what's not in any way an anti-capitalist rally? This is being put together by the libertarians, and not just the libertarians, but the most right-wing libertarians.
Right. Like the libertarians that the libertarians got mad at.
Well, yeah, literally. The classical liberal caucus of the Libertarian Party wasn't going to endorse the rally because of Scott Ritter and Tulsi Gabbard and a few other people.
Right.
And Scott Ritter was disinvited because of that.
Right.
But Tulsi Gabbard is still there, so they're still not endorsing. So even some of the, plus they don't like the LaRoucheites.
Right. I think you answered me when I wrote this. It's pretty, you got to give them credit. They really managed to bring some of like the worst people you could pull together.
Yes.
Under the guise of like anti-war into this anti-war rally.
It almost as if by design.
Yeah. Right. Which, that's kind of my belief on it, is this is all part of the plan. So.
Let's look at the least objectionable people, though, because I think it's important to look at the least objectionable people. Mm-hmm. The least objectionable people are what? Chris Hedges, Jill Stein.
Right.
I'm trying to think of someone else. If I'm missing anybody, help me. I know some people are going to try to say that Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil are less objectionable, but
right.
I don't think so after the end. They're still actively spreading COVID denial conspiracy theories on their personal accounts and writing about it on Gray Zone. So I don't know how that's really that acceptable.
It's hard for me because I have so many different theories on different things, and people keep misconstruing my point with regard to this rally, which is really, it's very, very simple. If you are pulling people together because you are claiming that you are trying to stop a war, right? Then you should not have people organizing or speaking who are not against war. Like, I feel like it's such a simple, like, this is one lane and this is the other, and they're literally going in opposite directions, and therefore the two can't meet, right? They can't be the same thing. And
there's a big difference between being against war and wanting Russia to win. Let's put that on the record.
Right. Because you can't be anti-war and pick a side.
It's true.
You really can't be. Like, you can't say, like, I'm anti-war, I don't want any war, but go Russia.
There is an argument to be made, and this is something that the pro-Russia side leads very hard on. There is an argument to be made that there is a legitimate issue with the self-determination rights of specific people in the Donbass who are legally Ukrainian citizens but speak Russian. And there are legitimate arguments that their self-determination has been violated, and more importantly, the facts are that the peace agreements that was supposed to keep people in that part of the country safe were violated by the Azov Nazis, and they were attacking people in in I hate it when I can't say the cities right, in Luhansk and Donetsk. They were attacking people in violation of the ceasefires. And the whole principle of the ceasefire was everyone was supposed to demilitarize. But the Nazis kept attacking, so how are the separatists going to demilitarize? There's a legitimate argument to be made there. However, that legitimate argument then says what we want is the fastest possible peace that recognizes those self-determination rights and guarantees people's physical safety.
Right.
That's not an argument for Putin winning. We have no proof that people are safer under Putin's jurisdiction.
There's that too. I mean, listen, there's so much information and there's a lot that people don't really talk about. Like, they don't talk about what's going on in Africa and, you know, the many, many ways that Africans have utilized the resources in Russia to advance their own countries. And so there's a lot, right? I am what people would call like a stupid anti-war purist. I don't agree with war for any reason at all, right?
Sure.
So for me, whatever reason people have to drop a bomb or shoot or kill or blow something up that's going to kill people who aren't doing anything, right? Who are just like living their lives. Like, I'm not down with it. I don't want any part of it. I'm about finding the quickest way, like you said, towards peace and people not losing lives, right? So my stance as far as the rally goes is, if you are of the belief that, you know, as Nick Brana says, that, like, you know, Putin's gonna destroy the US hegemony and whatever, then just say this is a anti-US giving money to the Ukraine war rally, right? Like, just be what you are, because that's okay. Like, it's okay.
I mean,
for us to
there
have a fundamental disagreement on what type of war is necessary, because you may think that some wars are necessary. You know, Tulsi thinks that the war on terror is necessary. She thinks that drones are necessary. People, like, there are levels to what people believe are anti-war. I am a purist anti-war person of the mind that there should be no war, period, right? I recognize that a lot of people are not like that people have their own reasons to decide and determine that there are some wars that are acceptable and need to happen, right? Okay, like, we can just agree to disagree. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not one to believe that everyone has to agree with me either. But in the end, you have now raised over they've got to be well over $100,000 at this point, under the guise of, we are going to stop all wars. But that's not your intention. That's not what you're saying. That's not what you're preaching. That's not what you believe. So what are we doing? Like, how is that the thing when that's just literally not what you're doing?
That's a good question. They could say, you know, we're anti-imperialist and we support Russia as a check on U.S. imperialism, which is what a lot of people are willing to say.
Yeah,
I have a former co-host who's willing to say that. He's doing a rally that he's calling a rally against imperialism.
right.
And he's organizing along the lines of self-determination and, you know, support for Russia in a limited way as a check on U.S. imperialism.
Right.
But that's open and honest.
Right. And that's it. And I think people would find I'd be less, like, verbose about my aggravation with this situation if it was real. But right. If it was real. Right. If it was really someone standing up and saying, we don't like that the U.S. has found their way into creating this situation that is now happening in the Ukraine. And we are going to gather together and we're going to speak about why we feel upset about the U.S. being involved and why we think that Russia has the right to do whatever they're doing in response. And we're going to speak to those things. Okay. Like, I mean, I just won't go, right? Like, because not that I agree with U.S. imperialism, but because I don't agree with war. So I'm just not, not going to participate, and that's okay. But when you pull it under the "we are anti-war" umbrella, and then you bring in people who literally would call for war to kill me here,
Yep.
right? And then you tell me that I'm not anti-war because I don't want to stand with those people. Now we have a problem.
And this is a big part of my objection to the way it's being sold. This is why I wrote a rebuttal to Chris Hedges, what I thought really egregious, the left has to join up with the right or fade into obscurity. I can only call it whining. I can only call it petulant whining for people to listen to him. And what bothers me about that is, number one, this is somebody that people have looked to as a leader who is refusing to lead and is instead explaining why he's following the wrong people.
Right.
And saying that now we have to follow him in following the wrong people. So what's the excuse for that?
There is none.
And let's look at the speakers. I mean, the least objectionable speakers are Chris Hedges and Jill Stein.
Right.
Who else even reaches that basic level of acceptability?
Yeah,
I can't think.
I'm going to take a look. Let's see. Maybe Roger Waters.
Roger Waters. Yeah, see. So I don't know. I don't know about Roger Waters.
But he'll at least say that Russia shouldn't kill innocent people.
He's at least also consistent on all this stuff. He's been good on Yemen. So yes, Roger Waters is acceptable. So that's 3 people.
Right.
The other acceptable person, Supreme. Have you followed the Supreme drama?
Well, he's not there anymore, right? Didn't he?
He wasn't ever going to be there.
Really?
He wasn't ever going to be there. He and the Wu-Tang Clan are trying to get Nick and the Movement for a People's Party to do they're trying to get them to cease and desist.
They did finally take him off the list because he's not there anymore.
So
he was there yesterday. So
he was never going to be there. And I'm almost wondering, this is all speculation. I've seen his image on a lot of Nick's events, and I don't know if he's ever actually shown up to any of them.
Interesting.
And I know that people have been like, well, how does Nick get all these celebrities to show up for events?
Interesting.
And so now there's a cease and desist order for using this person's likeness. Mm-hmm. And this person has been someone who's been advertised at a lot of different events. How long have they been saying Supreme was going to be there without permission?
Because he's been on that speaker list since the start.
Yes. And how much of nailing other celebrities, not just at this event, but effectively in past events, how much of it is based on a lie that so-and-so is going to be there when so-and-so isn't going to be there, but a bunch of other people show up because so-and-so is going to be there?
Yeah.
I'm speculating. I have no knowledge other than what's going on right now with this cease and desist from Supreme
and that he's been removed.
Clan.
And he's been removed. So obviously, and there is a few screenshots floating around of
the cease and desist order.
Angela McCardle, I think is her name, responding and saying that we never promised to give you $5,000 and we gave you $1,882 and you were supposed to pay for your travel. And
so this is telling us that at least one speaker expected to be compensated.
Right.
So now, with that in mind, this raises another question. How many of these other speakers are being compensated?
Right. And is that why they're so adamantly
was Chris Hedges paid to write that article?
Right. Because, the thing about Chris Hedges we have a copy of his book in my house because it was one of the things that, I'm a big WBAI listener here. Because I live in the New York City regional area. So it's live on my radio in the car. So on my way out in the morning, I listen to WBAI. On my way home in the afternoon, if it's a show that I'm interested in, I'll listen in the afternoon. We listen to WBAI in the car consistently. And so one of the giveaways was Chris Hedges' book. And I can't remember. I think he was on there with somebody, and I don't fully remember. This was a while ago. And so I have, a small amount of respect for some of the things that he talks about. And, and I think what bothered me the most when I read his article was the blatant, I'm just going to ignore the problems, right? We're going to pretend that everybody at the wars and at this rally is anti-war. Mm-hmm. We're going to pretend that none of the people who are speaking are very, very clearly championing one side of the war. We're going to pretend like some of these speakers aren't so blatantly bigoted and racist that it shouldn't be called into question. And we're only going to focus on this narrow thing that says but you all have to join with us because the war is the most important thing. And I can't get on board with that.
I agree. And this is where I want to break in and bring it back to Hedges, where he literally says in that article, well, I don't say that we should get together with Proud Boys or Oath Keepers or anything like that.
That was his red line.
Yes, that was his red line. We need to get but we need to make some sort of coalition with the libertarian right, and in which he was attempting to distinguish the libertarian right from the fascist right.
Right.
The problem is that the libertarian he's speaking with, Jordan Page, is an oath keeper. He's one of the outright members of the fascist right that Chris Hedges says he won't speak with.
Right. And somebody wrote and said, and it's a good point, right? We don't really have confirmation that he's actually a oath keeper member, right? Whatever membership implies with them.
Well, he said in an interview that he considers himself an oath keeper.
So that's good to know, because I didn't. He wrote the song that was the anthem, and he was giving proceeds and all this stuff. So to me, if you're doing all of that,
yes,
you not saying it is whatever, right? But if he said it, then okay, so that's even better.
We're on the same page in the first place, but I do want to point out that he said he considers himself to be an oath keeper.
So that's good. Okay.
Yeah, to disagree with anything.
And every time I've pointed that out, because he got on with Kim Iverson and giggled and talked about how silly it was that people weren't gonna participate because they had issues with speakers, and welcomed these people, the oath keepers, to come as long as they just come and be focused on the thing that you're supposed to be focused on. And I retweeted it and I said, I want somebody to send me evidence of any event, rally, anything where the racists showed up and didn't act like racists.
There's no such thing. It goes back as far to that guy Magnus, whose name is actually Zach. It goes back to that guy Magnus claiming that his people were security for Black Lives Matter at specific protests. Right. So one of the protests they cited was here in Portland, where Boogaloos committed a murder that Andy Ngo blamed on Antifa. So how were you helping Black Lives Matter in this case?
Right. And so to then call me CIA.
Yeah.
Because I said, people really should be cautious if they're going to go and attend this thing, because the people who it's going to bring out are problematic, to me is absurd. Because you are asking marginalized people to put their lives on the line to go stand around with people who don't respect their life. And it just that doesn't sit well with me. I can't resolve it in my own mind to be all right, we're just going to pretend like this thing isn't a potential problem. And then yesterday it was on Fox News. Right? Mm-hmm. Tucker Carlson is oh, you got to go to this. So who do you think is watching Tucker? Who are they drawing in?
Yeah.
When that's who they are promoting to. you have people sending out tweets that like, don't bring your gun. And people responding and saying, well, here's how you hide your gun if you bring it. Like, it's so...
How is this a safe
so
place?
Frustrated by the whole thing, right? And I laugh. I have a friend who does media, and she's like, "You laugh too much when you do these things." And I'm like, "Well, first of all, I'm half nervous and I'm half like incensed by the absurdity of the things that we're talking about. Like, I can't resolve it in my mind that people have enough gymnastics equipment up in there rotating around, enough apparatuses up there that they can do the mental gymnastics that it takes to pretend that people who are marginalized are not in danger when they go stand around with people who don't respect their life, literally."
This is Rorschach's joke from Watchmen. This is Rorschach's joke from Watchmen. It's why I laugh so much too. Rorschach is doing his voiceover. Man comes to see doctor. Doctor, I'm depressed. I can't get out of bed in the morning. I have no will to live. Doctor says, I have the cure. Great clown Pagliacci is in town today. Go see his show. Laugh, smile. You'll feel better. Patient. But doctor, I am Pagliacci. And I mean, that's how I feel a lot of the time, because I joke about this a lot because I would cry about it otherwise.
Right.
I put a lot of energy into trying to tell people positively, this is what you can do in your community.
Right.
And because otherwise, if I don't have that optimism and if I don't make those jokes, I am going to be overwhelmed with depression myself. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I do is for my own mental health and to try not to cry as much as it is for other people. I will admit that. And one of the reasons that I am honest about this stuff and don't really worry about taking sides in podcast wars and calling everybody out fairly equally is that I care less about whether I'm going to make money about this than I do about saying this stuff to people who are also thinking about it.
Right. And that's important. I think so many times people, they get their channel going, they get their whatever Patreon and their newsletters and whatever, and they've got stuff going, and it becomes about, how do I make enough money that this needs to be the only thing that I have to do, right? So you start working towards making money, which means you're less enticed by like just telling the truth and being honest, right? So I can admit, like, I have a full-time job. I've been in education for 20 years. My job is stable. I have insurance. I have, like, I'm, as far as like what the world tells us we're supposed to have in order to be okay, like, I have those things, right? Like, not to say we wouldn't have a problem if there's an emergency or, the simple thing, not simple, but the things that happen in life that throw things out of whack. I could easily fall prey to any of that, right?
Yeah.
But I don't need to use my truth to make money, right? So I don't do that, right? I have no money stream coming at all from anything that I do on Twitter, on YouTube, on anything. It's all me just trying to express my truth and making sure that people are aware of the information that I come across, because I'm one of those people who, if I see a headline, I don't just read the headline, I actually read the article. And then maybe I'll find another article and another article to try and make sure that I have a full and clear picture of what's happening. And so I get really frustrated when people come to me and say, oh, you're an op, oh, you're a Democrat op, oh, you're CIA, or you're paid, whatever. Like, I wish I was making some kind of side, maybe it's a little side money, but that's not the goal. That's not my goal.
People make that attack because they want to discredit critics because they don't have a response to the criticism.
Right.
It's also, and this is important to remember when Jimmy Dore calls somebody a sellout or an op or whatever, there is a tradition of bad actors deliberately labeling other people as bad actors in order to avoid suspicion themselves. People were killed in the American Indian movement and the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army because people who were actually spies for the feds were accusing other people of being spies for the feds.
Mm-hmm.
And because of these accusations, the real spies for the feds were able to do much more damage, and serious people who were serious comrades for liberation were killed.
Yeah.
When you're labeling someone an op, it's serious.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's like when you say so-and-so is an op on our side, it's really the same as when these people on the right say you need to defend yourself from so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
when white people call a Black woman an op for saying, these are my problems as a Black woman with platforming racists and people who aren't in solidarity with us on anything but this one narrow issue and want to kill us, for them to say she's an op, that's racist.
Yeah, it is. It is. I've been doing a lot. So I try to engage with people initially when people respond to me on whatever matter, because I don't know a lot of times when people respond, if they're asking a legitimate question because they don't know, they don't understand, whatever. And I try to be open to the possibility that like there's some knowledge that can be gained or given, right, in that exchange. Because I also don't know everything, right? So maybe the person asking the question has some piece of information that I don't have that would be helpful for me to get. So I try my best to do that initial engage. And then, but what I get back a lot are people who just come to be like disrespectful, right? Who just come to tell me that I'm complaining and I'm not anti-war, or that, you know, your identity politics don't matter, and, you know, we're all going to die. And do you think nuclear war, you know, is going to be able to tell who's Black and who's not? Like some of the commentary that comes back in an attempt to discredit my simply saying, I don't want to be around people who don't respect me as a person and don't respect my humanity simply because of the amount of melanin in my skin. Like, to me, I don't have the energy for it. So I've been doing a lot of blocking, a lot of muting, a lot of unfollowing, and, you know, because people, I think, start to follow me because they're waiting for me to say something that they can attack on my thread. So I've discovered this, like, this is what's happening.
I've noticed that lately too.
Yeah.
Or someone who's just been arguing with me in a thread is suddenly following me, and it's like, yeah.
Right.
No.
Right. So it's hard because it's hard to know who wants to have a real conversation and who just wants to be an asshole, you know, and for me, it's particularly painful because this is my life. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember back when George Floyd was murdered, there was a picture going around of a saying that was basically like, if you think you're sick of me talking about racism, imagine how sick I am of experiencing it, right? And so that sticks with me because that's how I feel. Like every time someone comes back to me to say, like, you know, you're always complaining about this, or you're always talking about race, and I'm like, but this is the life that I've been forced into. Like, right? If I could get through my days without experiencing racism, then I'd love not to talk about it, right? But that's not where we live.
When people complain about you talking about racism, you should respond, aren't you a free speech warrior? Weren't you telling everybody why the Proud Boys should have a chance to speak?
Right.
Don't I get the same free speech as the Proud Boys?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to see how they respond to that, because that's a tell.
That's true.
If they're trying to shut you up while talking about free speech for the Proud Boys, that's a tell.
That's true. And people never seem to quite get that when you talk about race purity and wanting white people to be in control, and that's also identity politics.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're also like championing the thing that you think is most important, which is that the white people stay in control. Like, you're just as much talking about identity as when I discuss racism, but you don't call it that, because for you, that's the thing that it's supposed to be, right? Like, they're going for like the ultimate, we want everybody to be rich and white and, to have control of everything, and not understanding that in order to champion that, you have to champion an identity.
Yes, you can't be anti-racist without being pro-black and pro-brown and pro-Asian. You can't, and you have to be all of them. You can't just be pro-brown or pro-Asian. You have to be, or even pro-black. You have to be all of them.
Right.
And as a white person.
But even as a black person, like, I don't have an interest in the oppressing of Olympics, right? Like, I don't want to debate with people about like my oppression being worse because of this thing or that thing. Like, I want all people to feel free. I want everybody to not be oppressed. I want everybody to be able to live their lives and be free to do whatever it is they want to do. That's not going to be harmful to other people. Like, I just don't, this idea that we have to pick one thing and stick behind it.
That's good for clicks. It's good for making money. If you notice, there's another drama that's related to people putting money over whatever they actually started streaming about. There was a big drama on Twitter again, where some black women took offense to a specific hashtag being used incorrectly by white people in the UK. Now, you can have an opinion on that one way or the other, but if somebody says, hey, this is what this hashtag is actually about, then the response is either, okay, I didn't know, thank you, or, you can engage on that in a respectful way without lying or making things up or huffily defending. And then when a streamer calls the people pointing this out woke scolds, then you can only take that as an anti-black statement and deliberately pushing trans rights in opposition to black people as opposed to in solidarity with black people.
Right. Because there's a way to be pro-black and not oppress other people. Right? Like, it's not a requirement for me to put other people beneath me in order for me to, want black people to also be free, right? Like, it's an important skill to not utilize your oppression to oppress other people.
No, and that's I think that's really good advice, because you see people doing it all the time. You see the people who have this idea that we should be appealing specifically to working class white people, usually with some terrible false consciousness image of what a working class white person is. Mm-hmm. They say, well, we shouldn't talk about this and we shouldn't talk about that. And we just want to talk about issues that'll bring white people in with us. And say, okay, we can talk about these issues that affect everyone, but at some point you have to talk about these issues to white people so white people know not to do these things. Otherwise, how are you going to change the relations between different racial groups within a class. How can you unify the class without racial solidarity instead of racial division?
Right.
And you can't get racial solidarity by pretending that white people aren't the problem.
That is also true.
But this is the thing, is that everybody wants to say that white people aren't the problem in order to somehow attract white people who would agree with them if they weren't being blamed.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing to do on an organizational level. That's something you can do on a personal level. There are people who have had really good results de-radicalizing individuals on a personal level when called in by that individual's family or that individual themselves. Mm-hmm. But that is a totally different thing than thinking that you're going to attend a Nazi rally and magically the Nazis will stop being Nazis.
Right. Or that they won't act like Nazis at the rally.
Yes. Which is a big risk when you're talking about, and I've tried to bring this up repeatedly, when you've got people telling other people how to hide their guns at the rally, then this raises the question, are communists and black people and queer people going to be safe at this rally where anti-communists and anti-black people and anti-queer people are speaking?
Right. And in a place where the white people are least likely to get checked for their weapons than anyone else would be.
Yes.
So even if you go as a black person, you say, okay, well, I'll just arm myself so I can be prepared. You are also creating a situation where you could be harmed by outside forces that have nothing to do with the rally. It's very, the whole thing is just so tricky because there's so many different ways that people use race, like trying to be anti-racist as an excuse to like, oh, this is a purity test, right? Like I see that Alex, by the way, Alex, the picture is killing me. He's like, he's got a whole thing going. I love it. You know, this idea of like a purity test, right? Like you have to be pure in order to participate. And it's not about being pure. It's not about not having issues. It's about not letting those issues allow you to treat other people like shit, right? Like that's really what it's about. So I was having another conversation with Sabrina on the Truth Talk, and he played a clip of Henkel and Dorr talking, which honest to God, like my head almost blew off listening to these two minis like have this conversation. But they were going back and forth about how stupid it was to have this purity test and to not try to organize with all people. And so Dorr brings up that he had Chris on from ALU, right? And he says, he goes into this whole thing about how he's in Staten Island, which is, you know, the Trumpers and the white Trumpers and yada, yada. And he was able to organize. So there's a whole lot missing in that conversation that, you know, if you're just a person who just listens to Dorr talk and thinks everything that he says is 100% true, like you'd be like, oh, well, so, you know, he went in there, Chris Smalls went in and he talked to the white people and, you know, they were racist, but it all worked out and they were able to start ALU. But what they're missing is one, there's a lot of black people who live in Staten Island and who also work at Amazon, right? Like it's not.
Let's raise an important fact about how jobs versus where people live relate these days. Right. So I live in a place called Tigard, which is sort of segregated along wealth between a working class, lower middle class section and a really rich section. And I work in a place called Tualatin, which is a really well-off city, but it also has an industrial section and a lot of apartments where people who live who aren't as well off as the people who own houses in this really well-off city. So nobody who works at these industrial sites in Tualatin is a homeowner in Tualatin. They are either commuting into Tualatin from somewhere else to work there, or like I am, or they live in these apartments in Tualatin and not in the houses.
Right.
So when we're talking about a majority white area like Staten Island, and then we're talking about the people who work in the Amazon warehouses, it is not always a direct correlation
right.
between who lives in the neighborhood and who works in the Amazon warehouse.
Right.
There are a lot of people who are...
There are like 5 different bus stops, if I remember correctly, out in front of those warehouses, and people commute in to work at the Amazon. Like, it's not like, people are just, they're just living and working and all, it's all the same population of people. But there are also Black people who live in Staten Island, and there are also white people who don't support Trump who live in Staten Island. And the reality is, whenever you're organizing on a job site for that type of thing, did you just lose sound or something, Chris?
No, I didn't lose sound. There was a troll in the chat, and I was trying to block the troll, and I blocked Alex by mistake, and then I did block the troll. Now I'm trying to figure out how to unblock Alex. I'm going to have to do that later, probably.
So,
just for the record, if you come into the chat, and I've got to apologize for blocking Alex. I'm sorry. Somebody tell Alex I'm sorry somewhere else. I will figure out how to unblock. If you come into the chat and you start immediately attacking the guest, I'm going to block you.
And I missed that, so works for me. So what the conversation was really, really lacking in nuance is that Chris talked to everybody, right? And when you are unionizing, you have to talk to everybody. But in order for people to participate at the table and have real conversations about how you unionize that group, you're not sitting next to Chris Smalls and acting like a racist asshole. Like, you are simply not doing that. That is not part of the equation. So this, oh, you're still muted. If you're I can't hear you.
Well, that's good, because I didn't want to break into you. I muted myself on purpose so I couldn't do it. But Chris Smalls didn't have Jackson Hinkle and Jimmy Dore sitting there being racist assholes while he was recruiting. Right. I mean, and what's more, and I saw somebody who must have seen that show try the same thing. It's like, well, Chris Smalls didn't play this identity politics stuff. And it's like, Chris Smalls doesn't have to. It's pretty clear that any Black people and white people who work at the Amazon warehouse are going to have the same feelings about Amazon. That's something that brings people together. The problem is you're ignoring that he's going to a place where both sides are equally safe because something there brings them together. He's not creating a white atmosphere and then telling everybody who says, this atmosphere is really white and might be dangerous for people who aren't white. Shut up. Come anyway.
Right.
Because I saw the conversation between you and that horrible.
And it's absurd. And plus, Amazon itself, it is very, very divided as an organization. The people who are the workers are majority Black and brown people, right? It's the people who are, the management that are majority white. So this idea that, like, when you're organizing at a company like Amazon, where the majority of people who you would be organizing are indeed Black and brown, like, it's just a lie to pretend that a Black person is going into this environment that's all white and organizing despite their racism. It's just not true. And so it's very, very, it's annoying to me and frustrating because it's the same lie that he keeps telling, just like he keeps lying and saying that Fred Hampton worked with racists, just like he keeps lying. You know, he even had the caucasity to quote Frederick Douglass, right? Like, I'll always do the right thing with the wrong people.
So
but that's not like, that's literally not what he was talking about, right?
No.
Like, Frederick Douglass was not out pulling together all of the slave masters.
No, and that's the whole thing.
Work with. Like, that's not what he was doing.
Frederick Douglass was justifying working with the U.S. government that they claim is the worst thing ever, and working with Abraham Lincoln, who was not yet fully committed to anti-racism, in order to make Abraham Lincoln less racist and to slowly work on him on an individual level to try to make him less racist and more amenable to pro-Black ideas.
And there was also a battle between the abolitionists about the blah 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 the
war.
No, the document.
Oh yeah, God, the Emancipation Proclamation.
No.
Which document?
Oh my God.
Constitution?
I needed to finish my coffee apparently first.
I know William Lloyd Garrison burned the Constitution on several occasions.
That's what they were fighting about. They were fighting about whether or not the Constitution was anti-slavery. So there were abolitionists that believed that the Constitution was anti-slavery because it was about freedom, right? Yes. And there were people who said that the Constitution was not anti-slavery because it was about freedom for white people.
William Lloyd Garrison was very specific that the Constitution was, in his words, a covenant with death that was that we needed to get rid of to have a free society.
Right. So there was a battle between the abolitionists, and that was actually, in my readings, where this statement came from, was him, because he was not of the belief that the Constitution was not anti-slavery. And so he was siding with the wrong type of abolitionist. Yes. And so, we're talking about two groups of people who firmly believe that slavery was wrong and the battle between them on how to get rid of slavery. Yes. We were not talking about people who were trying to get rid of slavery, working with people who were actively working to keep slavery.
No.
It's so far-fetched and such a stretch to try and put that statement in this situation. And I've seen plenty of I've had white people throw it at me as well. And I'm like, you all don't even read. Like, you're so busy listening to Jimmy Dore that you don't even understand what the historical reference of that statement was. And you're applying it wrong.
Yeah. And they don't, because they don't really care about the race stuff, which is the problem.
Right.
That is entirely the problem. And the people who don't want to talk about race are the people who themselves, the people who themselves have racial issues that they don't want to address or be called out on.
Right. Right. Still trying to figure out getting Alex back in. You look
a little bit. But no, and when you have this organization, because let's be honest, you have personal experience with this. The Movement for a People's Party is not a pro-Black organization and could be called anti-Black by anyone who had your experience with it.
I firmly call them anti-Black.
Exactly.
And have no issue doing so.
And
their mission is not at all in any way, shape, or form an attempt to fix the harm. No matter what their website says, right? That's not what they're interested in. And in fact, Nick Branna just did an interview recently where he basically says, I'm not progressive. I'm leaving the left. I'm going to work with the right. We're going to, work with the right to be anti-establishment and yada, yada, yada. So there are all these people who, are leaving the left because they want to get away from the purity test and the identity politics and all these things, but all they're doing is joining in with a bunch of people who use identity politics to marginalize and oppress other people. So, okay, if that's the side of the identity politics that you want to be on, okay, but don't pretend as if you are like the beacon of truth and you're going to fix everything that's wrong, because you are part of the problem.
And MPP associated accounts, including Jimmy Dore, made a lot of pro-Rittenhouse statements.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Dore platformed a defense of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the preferred candidate for president of the Movement for the People's Party, at least the last time they went on record supporting someone.
They're still doing it. They're still doing that. So,
and this is actually a good point. Has anyone else noticed how Nick has changed his looks to appear more Oathkeeper?
I noticed that, Kate. You are absolutely right. With the beard and the whole, but Nick's, this is my firm belief in Nick, and I will give him credit because I had a lot of conversations with him where he really had me fooled. He's a good talker, right? If you give him enough time, he can really convince you how sincere he is about wanting to get a thing done, right?
Yes.
In the end, Nick just wants to make money.
He's a grifter,
right? He is a person who his main desire is to be known as the person who did a thing and to make money while pretending to do that thing, right?
And you can never separate these right wing groups from grift. You really can't. No. William Pierce, the late William Pierce, horrible white supremacist, had built-in ways to make money off his followers and his organization. After he died, there were huge corruption scandals where people were competing for leadership of his organization, and it broke apart because his chosen heir was outed as being an even worse grifter than he was, and a whole bunch of people left the organization to start a new one, and then they were outed as grifters. So all of these right-wing organizations are grifting off their members in the first place. Right. This goes back to the revival of the Klan in Indiana, and I will always repeat this on the air because it's just such a good joke, but it's true. The guy who revived the Klan in Indiana in the early 20th century owned the biggest chain of dry cleaners in the state and was making money bleaching sheets.
Opportunist.
There's always an element of grift against your own recruits in these right-wing organizations. KKK in Indiana, Nazis in Germany, Nazis in the Ukraine, Nazis in America. It doesn't matter. There's always this element of grifting the people you're supposed to be helping in any of these Nazi movements.
And selling this idea that what you're doing is to help them, right? Like yes. Jimmy Dore, and sometimes he's right. Like, as much as it pains me to say it, it's not like everything he says is off kilter and wrong and ridiculous. And, he's right about some stuff. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah. And so, he may hit the mark on things every now and again, but in the end, he is making money off of making people angry with a situation that he is not helping to change in any way, shape, or form. All he is doing is profiting off of perpetuating that anger, right? And so he makes money. He really makes money off of the problems. So when you are making money off of selling the problem, there's no profit in fixing the problem, right? That's not going to help your bottom line. The profit is in making sure that you continue to feed people's anger about the problem that's happening. So I compared Jimmy Dore to Big Pharma, and people did not like that comparison at all, but they missed my general point, which was part of the problem with healthcare in this country is the profit is off of the treatment, right?
Yeah.
The profit is off of medicating, and the profit is not in making people healthy. Because
No,
if the profit was in making people
it's
healthy,
not.
then big pharma would not be
It's not in
profitable because
preventing
people would
or
not be
curing
sick.
disease. It's in
Right,
treating
people would not be
symptoms.
sick. So I made that comparison to say that his profit is in keeping people angry with the system, right? Because as long as he has people who can cheer him on and say, yeah, you're right, you're right, you're right, then he's going to make his money off of his super chats and his subs and whatever, whatever. But he's never going to really be enticed to fixing the problem, because if the problem is fixed, what is he going to talk about?
The problem with making your whole identity, here's identity politics again. The problem with making your whole identity about being anti-establishment is that if your whole identity is defined in opposition to an establishment, then you're dependent on that establishment.
Right. Right. And in the end, like, he's a millionaire, right?
Yeah.
Like, people got really mad because when the NDA story came out, they were like, oh, this is just a hit piece. You know, it's just, you know, you're just trying to tear him down, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, is anybody going to talk about the fact that he's a boss? Because that was my thing.
And not
right?
just
Like,
a boss. He's
right,
got
there's
people
nothing-
signing
there's-
NDAs with automatic $10,000 penalties.
Right. There's nothing, there's no, like, and, you know, and you and I talked about this, and I don't remember if it was actually on Twitter, if it was DM, I'm not a big fan of bosses, but this is where we live. We live in a capitalist society.
Yeah.
And you know, I'd love for capitalism to die, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime, certainly.
Sure.
And so I've accepted that bosses exist, right? I've accepted that this is part of what happens.
Sure.
And so in accepting that, I am okay in the sense of people got to live. So if you choose to be the boss, right, then that is a choice that you've made, and you are going to be a boss. What I don't accept is someone who is a boss, who acts like a boss, who does all the other thing that all the other bosses do, pretending as if you are a worker, because you're not a worker, you're a boss. And it's two separate lines, and you can't, they don't cross, because once you're a boss, you're a boss.
And if you're a boss and you want to align with workers, then show us how you're betraying the other bosses and siding with the workers. I mean,
right.
This is why I'm always skeptical about people like, I don't even remember his last name anymore, but the guy Dan, who was really popular for a little while because he raised everybody's pay. Dan Price, yes. And then he's outed as a bad boss and a predator in the workplace and a bunch of other things. He was just using being a better boss than other bosses. And
right. Although he didn't he quit? He stepped down.
He stepped down after the scandal.
Right. So he wasn't the boss anymore. So at least he did that.
Yeah, that's something.
At least he stepped down. I mean, and I remember that there was some scandals and he kind of dropped out of the limelight, but even after he stepped down, he still very much spoke about, if you're not giving your workers their voice, then, you know, you're not a very good boss, right? So I'm very skeptical sometimes of when stories come out about people, because you just never know, like, did the story come out because this person was actually anti-establishment, or did the story come out because there was because there was actually a legitimate, like, thing that needed to come out about that person, you know, like. And it's the same, it's I hate to say it, because it's the excuse that people use to continue to support Nick, right? Like, you all are only talking about the accusations of sexual harassment and assault because you're trying to silence Nick, right? So it happens. It does happen. We can't pretend that those things don't happen. But I think it's also important to pay attention with what people do when those things come forward, right? Do you come out and dox the person who made the accusation and do everything that you can to harass that person into silence? Or do you step down and continue to speak on the right topic and not focus on your own trying to pretend like you didn't do anything wrong, but instead focus on the topic that got you in trouble. So he's been popping up some more lately. So I think he's kind of coming out of the shadows, Dan Price. I mean, so we'll see what happens. I thought what he did was really admirable when he decided to take the pay cut, and he obviously was able to save his business because the workers believed in whatever it was that he was doing.
Well, that's interesting.
So it'll be interesting to see.
But I'm always skeptical though and the other guy, the bank, the good bank. I'm trying to remember the name.
There's a good bank.
Allegedly. And Joe Sandberg, that's the guy, Joe Sandberg, who is the CEO of, or was the CEO of a bank that was promising to be ethical and moral and not invest in anything bad. And of course, the way Wall Street works, that is almost impossible.
Yeah.
And I don't think a bank that didn't invest in anything bad could ever make money. And so I've always been skeptical about that. And as a result, a little skeptical of him.
Yeah, well, it's very hard for even, so Greenwood is a bank that was promoted to be for, in the support of Black and brown people, right? It's actually not its own separate financial institute. It's actually like Coastal Carolina. I can't remember exactly what the bank behind the bank is. And so, all of these things, there's always an element of trying to find out who's really behind the curtain, right? And that's the thing that people very rarely take the time and energy to do. They very rarely step back when they hear about something and make an effort to figure out, like, who's the Wizard of Oz in this situation? Like, who's behind the green turkey? Who's behind the green curtain?
It was Aspiration Bank is the name of the bank.
Is that it's still a bank? Does it still exist?
Let's see. Joe Sandberg isn't advertising himself as the co-founder anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, they're among other things, they're dealing in carbon credits for businesses.
So there you go.
If they're dealing in carbon credits for businesses, then they're part of the fake neoliberal. We'll pretend to do something about climate change, but we're capitalists, so we won't really do anything.
We're actually supporting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when it all and as we always do, we've gone so far from the topic that we started out talking about that I almost forgot that we
get back on.
We started this talking about the rally, but it's the same problem, right?
Yes.
Like, people see the announcement, Rage Against the War Machine, and they get very, very excited because they're angry about war, and they want to stand up in opposition to this thing that's happening. And so what I really want people to start to do is not to just accept something because they tell you what it is, because someone else tells you what it is, right? Like, don't be lazy. Take the minute to kind of go through and figure out what are all the things that they're not telling me with this initial announcement. They're not telling you about how much money they're raising. That's going to be completely smoke and mirrors. No one's ever going to know where that money went, right? They're not telling you very clearly. Like, it says that they're a 501c3 and it's not tax deductible. But if you don't know what that means, right? If you don't take the time to look up that the 501c3 means that your money could be going to a political party or a politician who maybe you really and truly do not support, like, you don't know that. If you're not looking at the speakers to be able to say directly, like, wait a minute, this guy Hinkle sat on a TV show and downplayed slavery.
Yeah.
Right?
This
If
is
you're
also a
not,
good time to mention, and I know that people hate guilt by association, but what do Jackson Hinkle, Kim Iverson, Steve Bannon, and Jack Posobiec all have in common? They all are related. They are all doing business with the same booking agency for their speeches. So we got Hinkle, who started out on the left, and Kim Iverson, who used to claim to be progressive, working with the same booking agency as Steve Bannon and all these other right-wingers.
right. But you want me to go and stand around and listen to him. And he is, I mean, honestly, and it's mean to say out loud, but he's stupid. Like he's really like not intelligent. And all he does, he just picks a thing to talk about that he thinks is going to get him like clicks and retweets, or people are going to watch. And I don't even know if it occurs to him how dumb he sounds sometimes. Like, I don't think he even, either he knows it and he thinks that it's worth the money to sound as ignorant as he does, or he doesn't realize that there are really people outside of Twitter who's like, this guy's a moron.
What makes it fascism? One of the things that makes fascism is the decision to support mutually agreed upon lies as the truth. And people who support those lies.
You can hear my dog. Can you hear the dog barking?
Okay.
The dog is going. So I hate to do it, but I think I'm going to have to like last minute jump because
Fair enough.
I thought I was going to have until 12:15, but I can hear the chaos going upstairs.
I understand.
I'm really sorry. But I just want to say I hope people are safe today, because in the end, that's the thing that in my heart is like very, very concerning for me, is that people are going to go out there and somebody's going to get hurt because of the crew and the cast of characters that are behind this thing and that are leading it and that are speaking. And I want people to be safe. And there's nothing we can do but tell people the truth and hope that they go with eyes wide open and paying attention to what's around them.
Exactly. And the simple fact is it's not safe. Thank you for joining us, Renee. You have a great rest of your Sunday.
You do the same. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. So I just want to say a few things before we wrap up. There is one definite, Connor mentioned this earlier, and I definitely want to come back to it. I made a note of it when I saw it. My problem with the Russian check on U.S. imperialism is that it creates a need for a Russian imperialist state or a Chinese imperialist state, etc., and so on. And yeah, that's a big part of the problem with it. It's literally saying we need these other empires to be a check on the U.S. empire. And then that justifies the next empire to be a check on them when they win. And it's not breaking out of the cycle. So that's true and important to think about, and something that we need to keep in mind. It's also true that these are right-wing organizations. The Mises Caucus took over the Libertarian Party with the help of MAGA money. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire was tweeting that Black people owe America, and they're one of the state parties that shipped in $500 to help fund this event. So you have to look at who is organizing it. It's not that we are being asked to support some sort of joint left-right event where there will be lots of people who agree with us in the audience and we'll be safe. This is a situation where we are being asked to attend a Nazi rally advertised on Fox News and through reactionary right-wing channels. and to express support for that. We are not being asked to participate in some anti-capitalist, anti-war movement like the Answer Coalition is doing in March. We are being asked to sign up for the Libertarian Party or the Movement for a People's Party and give them money. That's where I want to finish. That's what I'm against. And if we're serious about building an anti-capitalist movement, there's no reason for us to grow a libertarian anti-communist movement that is just going to want to throw us from helicopters lately. Thank you, and have a great weekend and a great President's Day if you get a holiday tomorrow. And I'll be tweeting at you.